Have you ever wondered what it would be like to truly understand what someone is thinking? Not through magic, not through guessing, but through pure awareness. Most people spend their lives trying to be heard, but very few ever learn how to really hear others. We look at faces, we read expressions, we assume we know what someone feels, but the truth is, most of us don't. We live surrounded by people, yet remain strangers to their inner world. But here's the secret. The power to read someone's mind doesn't come from supernatural ability. It comes from asking the right questions, in the right way, with the right heart. If you stay until the end of this video, you'll learn 5 powerful questions that can reveal what's truly going on in anyone's heart and mind. Questions that can build trust, deepen relationships, and even help you understand yourself on a whole new level. You see, every mind is like a locked door. And most people try to open it with force, with opinions, with arguments, with assumptions, but questions are the master keys. They don't break the lock, they invite the door to open from the inside. When you ask someone a real question, one that shows you care, one that shows you're not just listening to reply, but listening to connect, something beautiful happens. Their guard falls, their mind relaxes, their truth begins to flow. Think about it. How many people in your life have actually tried to understand you deeply? Not just what you do, but why you do it. Not just what you say, but what you mean beneath the words. Very few, right? That's because true connection requires intention. It requires presence. Most people rush through conversations like they're racing against time. But when you slow down, when you ask the right questions, you create a moment that lasts, a moment where someone feels seen. And that feeling, being seen, is one of the deepest human desires. It's what drives our behavior, our choices, even our mistakes. We all crave connection, but we often look for it in the wrong places. We want others to understand us first, but the real power begins when we take the first step, when we choose to understand them. Every great leader, every extraordinary communicator, every wise soul throughout history mastered this truth. Connection starts with curiosity. They didn't just talk, they asked. They didn't just command, they listened. They understood that behind every person lies a story waiting to be told, a truth waiting to be unlocked, and they knew that the fastest way to reach someone's mind is to first reach their heart. This is the foundation of reading people, not manipulation, not control, but understanding. Because when you understand, you influence naturally, not through fear but through trust. When people feel you genuinely care about who they are, their defenses disappear. They stop performing and start revealing. Imagine walking into any room, any conversation, and having the power to see beyond words, to sense what someone truly feels, to understand what motivates them, to connect instantly on a deeper level. That's not a gift you're born with. That's a skill you build through awareness, empathy, and curiosity. The world doesn't need more talkers. It needs more listeners. More people who can ask questions that open hearts instead of closing them. Because a single powerful question can do what 1,000 speeches cannot. It can make someone reflect. It can make someone trust. It can make someone feel understood. And that changes everything. There's a quiet strength in those who know how to ask. They move differently through life. They don't try to impress, they try to connect. They don't seek attention, they give it. They know that the real way to understand others is to step into their shoes, not with assumptions, but with curiosity. And here's where psychology steps in. The human brain naturally relaxes in the presence of genuine interest. When someone feels heard, their mind produces oxytocin, the chemical of trust. Their emotional defenses lower. They feel safe to open up. That's why the art of asking good questions is more powerful than persuasion itself, because persuasion works from the outside in, but connection works from the inside out. So when you ask, not to judge, not to pry, but to understand, you tap into something deeply human. You create a bond that logic alone can't build. You read the pauses, the tone, the emotion behind the words. You begin to see them, not just look at them. By the end of this video, you'll know the 5 questions that can unlock the truth in anyone. Questions that reveal their values, their struggles, their passions, their gratitude, and their vision for life. But before we go there, remember this. The real magic isn't in the questions themselves. It's in the intention behind them. It's the energy you bring when you ask. It's the genuine desire to understand. So if you've ever wished to truly connect, to stop guessing what people think and start knowing, stay with me. Because once you learn how to use these 5 questions, you'll never look at human interaction the same way again. You'll begin to notice patterns, emotions, hidden meanings, and you'll discover that reading minds isn't a mystery. It's a skill anyone can learn if they have the courage to care. And that's where our journey begins. With one powerful truth: to understand others, you must first master the art of asking. So why is it that even though we all crave connection, we so often fail to understand the people around us? The reason is simpler and sadder than most realize. We've forgotten how to listen. We've built a world full of noise where everyone wants to be right, but no one wants to understand. We talk to defend, to prove, to impress, but very few talk to connect. And because of that, we miss what people are truly trying to say beneath their words. Most of the time, we don't hear people. We hear our own thoughts about them. The mind filters every conversation through layers of ego, bias, and past experiences. When someone speaks, we instantly judge, "I know what they mean." But we don't. We think we're reading their mind, yet we're only reading our own assumptions. We see their behavior, not their pain. We hear their words, but not their silence. This is why relationships crumble, friendships fade, and teams break apart. It's not because people stop caring, it's because they stop understanding. The human brain is wired for self-protection. We listen only long enough to respond, not to connect. We build walls instead of bridges. We analyze instead of empathizing. And the tragedy is that we confuse being heard with being understood. But being heard is just noise. Being understood is healing. When you stop listening to respond and start listening to feel, everything changes. You begin to notice the small things, the hesitation in someone's voice, the pause before they answer, the emotion hidden between their words. That's where the truth lives. That's where real connection begins. Most people won't tell you what's wrong directly. They drop clues in tone, body language, and subtle expressions. Only a quiet, attentive mind can catch them. The ego hates to listen. It wants to be the smartest voice in the room. It wants to interrupt, correct, and prove. But understanding doesn't grow in ego's presence. It grows in humility. When you listen without trying to fix, you show respect. When you ask without assuming, you show care. When you give someone space to express themselves freely, you give them one of the greatest gifts of all: acceptance. Psychologically, the reason this matters so deeply is because every human mind is constantly scanning for one thing: safety. When people feel safe, they open up. When they feel judged, they close off. So if you want to truly understand someone, don't focus on being interesting, focus on being interested. Don't try to impress them, try to feel them. Your presence, your tone, and your willingness to listen communicate more than your words ever could. Think about it. How often do we assume we already know someone? We say, "Oh, I know how they think." But people are never that simple. Everyone you meet carries an invisible story. Some are written in pain, others in hope, many in silence. You can't read that story by watching their actions. You can only read it by asking and listening with patience. The moment you think you know someone completely, you stop discovering who they really are. True understanding takes courage. It takes the courage to silence your own opinions long enough to let someone else's truth be heard. It means stepping into their perspective, even when it challenges yours. It means asking questions not to win, but to learn. That's why the art of asking is so powerful. It reminds people they matter. It tells them, "I want to see the world through your eyes." And that's something every soul longs to feel. When we fail to understand others, we don't just lose connection with them. We lose a part of ourselves, because every person you meet is a mirror, reflecting parts of you that you may not yet see. Their struggles remind you of your own. Their dreams inspire your growth. Their fears awaken your compassion. The more deeply you understand people, the more deeply you understand life itself. So ask yourself, when was the last time you listened to someone without interrupting? When was the last time you looked into someone's eyes and truly tried to see them? Not as a label, not as a role, but as a living, breathing soul, carrying hopes and battles you may never know. That kind of awareness transforms relationships, and it transforms you. To understand people, you must unlearn judgment. You must replace assumption with curiosity. Every time you think, "I already know," stop and ask, "What am I missing?" Because that question alone can turn conflict into connection, distance into understanding, and misunderstanding into peace. The people around you aren't puzzles to solve, they're stories waiting to be heard. But most stories remain untold, Not because people don't want to share them, but because no one ever asks. And even when someone asks, few truly listen. So be different. Be the person who asks sincerely and listens completely, because that's how you begin to read the minds of others, not through words, but through empathy. When you stop talking to be understood and start listening to understand, the world around you changes. The noise fades. The walls fall, and suddenly you begin to see people as they are, not as you imagine them to be. That's the beginning of emotional intelligence. That's the birth of real human connection. And that is the moment you stop hearing just words and start hearing hearts. When you finally begin to listen with your heart instead of your ego, you start to see something powerful. That connection isn't built through words alone, but through energy. Every human interaction carries a silent rhythm, a flow of emotion and intention that the mind may not fully grasp, but the soul always feels. This is the psychology of connection, the invisible bond that forms when two people truly understand each other. It's the meeting point between empathy and awareness, between curiosity and care. At its core, every human being longs for the same three things: to be seen, to be heard, and to be understood. These are not luxuries of love. They are emotional needs as essential as air. When a person feels unseen, they withdraw. When they feel unheard, they grow defensive. But when they feel understood, truly understood, they bloom. Their guard falls, their authenticity surfaces, and their truth begins to speak. That is the moment you stop communicating and start connecting. This connection doesn't require grand gestures. It doesn't demand eloquence or perfect timing. It simply asks for presence, full, undivided attention. In psychology, this is known as attunement, when your awareness aligns with another's emotional state. You begin to mirror not their words, but their feelings. You start to sense what they mean beyond what they say. That's why sometimes you can feel someone's sadness without them mentioning a word, because emotional signals are louder than language, if you're quiet enough to hear them. The problem is, most people have lost that sensitivity. We live fast, think fast, speak fast, but feel slow. We listen to reply, not to absorb. Yet understanding others requires stillness. You cannot hear a whisper in a storm, and you cannot feel another person's truth when your own mind is full of noise. Silence is not emptiness, it's space, the space where understanding grows. When you learn to create that space within yourself, people start to open up around you naturally. They sense your presence, they feel safe, because safety is the foundation of emotional connection. Neuroscience proves this. When a person feels safe and accepted, their brain releases oxytocin, the chemical of trust and bonding. It quiets their fear, softens their tone, and allows vulnerability to rise. That's how you gain access to someone's inner world, not by forcing them to speak, but by giving them the feeling that they can. Every time you choose to understand instead of react, you build trust. And trust is the gateway to the human mind. You can't read someone's thoughts when they're guarded, just as you can't see your reflection in a stormy sea. But when the waters are calm, when your energy radiates patience and empathy, the truth reflects back to you effortlessly. The most profound connections are not built on shared opinions, but on shared emotions. You don't have to agree with someone to understand them. You just have to feel where they're coming from. The moment you stop trying to change someone and start trying to understand them, you give them permission to be authentic. And authenticity is where the human soul reveals itself. Think about the people you feel closest to, not those who talk the most, but those who listen the deepest. The ones who don't rush you, who don't try to fix you, who simply make space for you to be yourself. That's what makes them special. It's not their words, it's their energy. Because real connection is felt before it's heard. Understanding others doesn't just change relationships, it transforms your entire life. It sharpens your intuition. It helps you make better decisions, not just with others but with yourself. You begin to sense when someone's hiding pain behind a smile, when they're struggling in silence, when their anger is really just fear in disguise. And this awareness gives you compassion, not weakness, but strength. The kind of strength that heals, that leads, that inspires. When you operate from empathy, you stop fighting people and start healing them. You stop reacting and start responding. You begin to see that behind every behavior lies an emotion, and behind every emotion lies a need. Sometimes that need is love. Sometimes it's recognition. Sometimes it's peace. But when you can see that far, when you can look beyond the surface and read the story behind someone's words, you no longer need to guess what's in their mind. They tell you without even realizing it. This is the true art of understanding, being able to sense the unspoken, to notice the tension behind laughter, the hesitation before a yes, the subtle flicker of the eyes when something matters. People reveal themselves constantly, but only to those who pay attention. So pay attention, not just to words, but to pauses, not just to smiles, but to sighs, not just to what's said, but to what's avoided. That's where the truth hides. The beauty of this kind of awareness is that it doesn't just help you connect with others, it helps you connect with yourself. Because the more you understand people, the more you understand the human condition. You begin to see parts of yourself in everyone. Their fears remind you of your own. Their dreams mirror yours. Their struggles echo your hidden battles. Connection becomes a mirror, and through it, you grow. Every conversation you have is an opportunity, not to impress, but to understand, not to win, but to connect. When you learn to see people as stories instead of statistics, as emotions instead of expressions, you unlock the deepest form of intelligence, emotional intelligence. And once you master that, you can read not only minds but hearts. Because in the end, understanding others isn't about decoding them, it's about caring enough to try. That's the real psychology of connection. Presence, curiosity, and love disguises attention. When you understand the deep psychology of connection, the next step becomes natural. You start to ask questions that reveal the unseen layers of a person's inner world. Every question is like a small light that guides you closer to the truth. And the first question, the one that opens the door to someone's soul, is simple yet powerful. What matters most to you? At first it sounds ordinary, but hidden within it is something extraordinary. This question doesn't ask about facts, it asks about meaning. It forces a person to pause, reflect, and reach into themselves for an honest answer. Most people go through life doing things without ever stopping to ask why. So when someone asks them what truly matters most, they are reminded of something deeper. Their values, their priorities, their reasons for living. Values are the blueprint of the human mind. They shape how we think, how we love, how we act. When you know someone's values, you don't just understand their choices, you understand their essence. A person who values honesty will protect truth, even when it hurts. Someone who values freedom will resist control, even when it's comfortable. A person who values family will sacrifice personal desires to protect their loved ones. So when you ask what matters most, you're not just gathering information, you're touching the foundation of their identity. Psychologically, this question invites vulnerability. The mind feels safe when it's allowed to speak about purpose. It shifts from defense to openness. People reveal their deepest truths not when you interrogate them, but when you make them feel seen. Asking what matters most is like saying, "Your world is important. I want to understand it." And that is one of the greatest gifts you can give another human being. Notice how people's eyes change when they answer this. Their tone softens, their words slow down, their energy deepens. You can hear sincerity in their voice because this question forces the heart to speak. It moves them out of surface-level conversation, away from what they do, and into who they are. That's when you start reading their mind without effort, because we're no longer hearing just answers, you're hearing values in motion. And here's where most people miss the opportunity. They listen to the words, but not to the why behind them. When someone says, "My career matters most," it's easy to assume they're materialistic. But maybe it's not about money. Maybe it's about self-worth, purpose, or security. When someone says, "My family matters most," it's not just love. It might also be fear of losing connection, or a longing to belong. Every answer carries layers. The more you listen between the lines, the clearer the picture becomes. The goal is not to judge their priorities, but to understand the story that built them. Our values are shaped by pain, by experience, by hope. Ask anyone what matters most to them, and you're really asking, what has shaped you? It's an invitation to share their story. And when someone shares their story, they are giving you a piece of their mind, a piece of their soul. Understanding what matters most to someone doesn't just help you read them, it helps you connect with them at the level of meaning. Once you know their values, you can speak in their language. You can inspire them, comfort them, or guide them because you now understand what moves them from within. So, the first step to reading anyone's mind is to uncover what drives their heart. Ask gently, listen deeply, pay attention to what lights them up and what silences them, because when you know what matters most to someone, you no longer need to guess who they are. They've already shown you. Once you begin to see what matters most to someone, you start to understand the roots of their strength. But to truly read their mind, you also need to understand where they feel weak, the places where they are quietly struggling. This is where the second question holds its power. What's been challenging for you lately? At first it might seem like a casual question, but it's one of the deepest gateways into someone's emotional world. It invites honesty without demanding it. It gives permission to drop the mask. In a world where everyone tries to appear fine, this question says, you don't have to pretend with me. And that simple sense of safety can open up even the most guarded hearts. People carry invisible battles every day. Battles with doubt, fear, pressure, and pain. Most of them will never tell anyone about it unless they sense compassion in the air around them. This question does exactly that. It tells the other person that you're not interested in their performance, but in their truth. It tells them that it's okay to be human. When someone answers this question, listen carefully to how they respond, not just what they say. Some will answer quickly, brushing it off, as if it doesn't matter. That's usually a sign of buried pain. Others will hesitate, searching for words. That's the mind wrestling with vulnerability. And some will open up fully, their tones softening, their guard falling. In that moment, you're no longer having a conversation. You're witnessing the human heart in motion. Psychologically, when people share their struggles, they're not looking for solutions, they're looking for understanding. The brain releases stress through expression. That's why talking feels like healing. The simple act of sharing pain with someone who listens without judgment helps the nervous system relax. It creates connection through empathy, not through advice. You don't need to fix what someone feels. You just need to let them feel safe enough to say it. When you ask about someone's struggles, you step into the most sacred space of human connection, vulnerability. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's the language of truth. It's the raw space where fear, courage, and authenticity meet. Everyone wears armor, but the moment they feel seen, that armor begins to fall. And that's when you begin to read their inner world. Because what a person struggles with reveals what they care about most. A person who worries about failure often has a deep desire to prove their worth. Someone who fears loss is someone who loves deeply. Someone who hides pain behind humor is often protecting their sensitivity. Every struggle is a reflection of a hidden value or wound. So when you learn to see beyond the surface, you stop judging people by their behavior and start understanding them by their emotions. This is where emotional intelligence becomes your greatest strength. The ability to notice the patterns, the words people avoid, the emotions they deflect, the tension in their tone, gives you insight into their mindset. You begin to see not just the struggle, but the story behind it. Maybe it's a childhood memory that shaped their fears. Maybe it's a recent failure that shook their confidence. Maybe it's the weight of expectations they carry silently every day. Every person is fighting something unseen, and when you ask this one question, you offer them something rare, relief. And when they answer, respond with empathy, not comparison. Don't say, I know how you feel. Say, that sounds really hard. Because the truth is, you don't need to share the same experience to understand someone's pain. You only need to care. Compassion is what builds trust, and trust is what unlocks honesty. When people feel understood, they naturally begin to reveal more. They tell you not just about their problems, but about their fears, their hopes, and their thoughts that they've never spoken aloud. This is how you start reading between the lines of someone's life. You begin to sense what their heart is protecting and what their mind is avoiding. So, if you want to connect deeply, don't be afraid to ask, what's been challenging for you lately? Say it with warmth, not curiosity. Ask it with presence, not pressure. Because in that one question lies the power to heal, to understand, and to connect on a level most people never reach. The truth is, everyone is fighting something, but only a few are brave enough to ask, and only a few are kind enough to listen. When you do both, you'll not only read people's minds, you'll touch their souls. When you create the space for someone to share their struggles, something remarkable happens. Their mask begins to fall, and their truth starts to breathe. But to truly read someone's mind, you must also see what brings their soul alive. Pain reveals where a person has been, but passion reveals where they're going. That's where the third question becomes powerful. What makes you feel most alive? This question shifts the energy. It turns the focus from pain to purpose, from struggle to spark. Every human being has something that lights them up inside, an activity, a dream, a cause, or even a simple moment that makes life feel meaningful. When you ask this question, you invite someone to remember who they really are beneath the noise of responsibility, fear, and expectation. You're not just asking about hobbies, you're asking about their heartbeat. The way people answer this tells you everything about their inner fire. Some will speak with excitement, their voice gaining rhythm as if their words are dancing. Others might pause, realizing they've forgotten what makes them come alive. That pause is just as meaningful. It reveals that somewhere along the way they've lost connection to their joy. And that's something most people never notice about others because they never ask. Psychologically, this question awakens the reward center of the brain. When someone talks about something they love, dopamine floods their system, the same chemical that fuels motivation, hope, and energy. This shift not only lifts their mood, but also strengthens the bond between you and them. You're no longer just having a conversation, you're igniting a spark of life inside them. That spark is how trust deepens, because people remember how you make them feel. If you make them feel alive, they'll naturally open up to you more. Passion is the purest window into the human spirit. It reveals what someone believes in, what they dream about, and what they might be too afraid to chase. When you ask this question, listen for what their passion says about their identity. A person who loves to create may crave freedom and self-expression. Someone who loves helping others might be seeking purpose through service. Someone who feels alive when exploring new places is likely driven by curiosity and growth. Passion is never random. It's the voice of the soul trying to be heard through action. But here's the thing, not everyone will have an immediate answer. Many people have buried their passions under the weight of survival. They stopped dreaming because life convinced them to be practical. If that happens, don't push. Simply say, take your time. What used to make you feel alive? That one word, used to, gives permission to revisit forgotten parts of themselves. It reopens doors that life quietly closed. You'll often find that their eyes soften, their tone changes, and suddenly they start remembering the version of themselves that once believed life could be magical. This question is powerful because it shifts perspective. It reminds people that there's more to them than their struggles. It invites them to reconnect with the energy that makes them unique. And when you can help someone rediscover that spark, you become more than just a listener. You become a mirror reflecting their best self back to them. That's when people feel understood, on a level words can't describe. When you know what makes someone feel alive, you understand what drives their choices, what keeps them motivated, and what they fear losing. You understand what gives their life color and rhythm. This knowledge allows you to communicate with them in a way that resonates deeply. Because once you know someone's passion, you also know their language, the emotional frequency that awakens their trust. And even beyond others, this question is a mirror for yourself. Ask it often. What makes me feel alive? Because the more connected you are to your own passion, the more easily you'll recognize it in others. People who have light within them naturally see it in the hearts around them. Your awareness becomes magnetic. It draws authenticity out of people who may not even know how to express it. So, when you truly want to understand someone, don't just look at what they endure, look at what excites them. Ask what gives them energy, what makes them forget time, what fills them with purpose. Because when a person speaks about what they love, they're not just talking, they're revealing their soul. And if you listen closely, you'll realize that reading someone's mind isn't about analyzing their thoughts. It's about feeling the pulse of their passion. That's where real understanding begins, in the places where the heart comes alive. When you understand what makes someone feel alive, you begin to see the invisible strings that pull their emotions and decisions. But to truly read a person's mind, you have to go even deeper, beyond their joy, beyond their passion, into the space where their dreams meet their fears. That's where the fourth question unlocks a truth most people hide even from themselves. What are you most afraid of losing? This question cuts through every layer of pretense. It's not about material things or possessions, it's about what someone values at their core. People may say they fear failure, rejection, or death, but when you listen closely, those fears always trace back to something deeper, the fear of losing love, identity, control, or meaning. When you understand what someone is afraid to lose, you understand what gives their life emotional weight. You begin to see what drives their choices, what shapes their defenses, and what limits their freedom. Ask this question gently, not as an interrogation, but as an invitation. Most people have never been asked it sincerely, and that's why it holds so much power. When someone begins to answer, you'll notice hesitation. Their eyes might shift, their tone might soften, and for a moment, they'll drop the armor they've built. That hesitation is where truth lives. Because it's in that moment, the pause between honesty and vulnerability, that their real self starts to speak. Psychologically, this question touches a part of the brain that processes loss. The same place where attachment and empathy are formed. When someone opens up about what they fear losing, they're not just telling you about their worries, they're revealing how they love, how they connect, and what gives their world meaning. It's one of the few questions that speaks directly to the heart, bypassing the rational mind. For example, someone might say, "I'm afraid of losing my job," but listen deeper. The real fear might be losing their sense of worth or stability. Another might say, "I'm afraid of losing the people I love," but underneath, it's the fear of being left alone, of feeling invisible. Every answer carries an emotional fingerprint, and when you learn to hear that pattern, you can understand people with a kind of clarity that goes beyond words. The beauty of this question is that it also reveals priorities. What a person fears losing most shows you what they protect most. It shows you where their energy goes, what they sacrifice for, and what they would fight for no matter what. If you observe carefully, you'll start to notice that many people live their whole lives trying to protect something they've already lost. Trust, innocence, self-belief, peace. This awareness helps you see not only who they are, but also who they're trying to become. But this question isn't just about others. It's also a mirror for your own growth. What are you most afraid of losing? Is it your reputation, your comfort, your relationships, or your sense of control? Because whatever it is, that fear has power over you. When you face it, you break its control. You begin to live more freely, more authentically. The same applies to others. When they express their fear, they start to take away its power. You become a witness to their healing. That's why asking this question isn't manipulation, it's connection. It's how you reach the human beneath the habits, and once that connection is made, you can predict almost every choice they'll make, not because you're reading their thoughts, but because you understand their emotional map. Every human decision is either a move toward what we love or away from what we fear losing. Every word, every silence, every smile, all of it carries traces of that tension. When you master this awareness, your relationships transform. You no longer get angry when people act defensively, you see the fear behind it. You don't take rejection personally, you recognize it as someone protecting their heart. You begin to respond with understanding instead of reaction, and that is one of the highest forms of emotional intelligence, the ability to see pain and not judge it, to see fear and not feed it. There's a quiet power in understanding what someone values so deeply that they do anything not to lose it. It's what gives meaning to empathy, compassion, and love. And when you approach people with that level of awareness, they feel something they rarely experience: safety. Safety to be real, to be imperfect, to be seen. Reading someone's mind isn't about control. It's about connection. It's about understanding what their heart protects most fiercely. Because once you know that, you stop guessing who they are. You start truly seeing them. You see the child behind the adult, the dreamer behind the mask, the hope behind the fear. And that's where real understanding begins, not in the words people say, but in what they're most afraid to lose. When you uncover what someone is most afraid of losing, you begin to see the deepest layer of their humanity, the place where love, fear, and identity all intertwine. But there's one more question that reveals the final truth beneath it all, the one that exposes what a person truly believes about themselves and the world. That question is simple, yet it shakes the foundations of self-awareness. What do you believe people often misunderstand about you? This question pierces through the mask. Everyone walks through life carrying unseen stories, quiet battles, and misunderstood intentions. People crave to be seen for who they really are, not for how the world defines them. When you